Hello and welcome everyone to this session on child abuse linked to faith or belief. Thank you for joining us today. We welcome any questions that may arise during the training. However, also understand that some questions will come up after the training, so please feel free to note down our emails on the next slide to contact us. This is a sensitive area, as all safeguarding training is, so please be mindful and take breaks if you need to. The session will be recorded and be made available after today's session. I'm Stacey Mann and I'm the subject specialist here at NCFE for early years and childcare. My email there is on the screen for you, so if you have any questions after today's session, please do get in touch. I'm joined today by Kelly Johnson, who is our Provider Development Officer, and her email is also there for you. This webinar is a bite-sized CPD session where we will be raising an awareness of child abuse linked to faith or belief. We'll be reflecting on current practice to identify children and young people who may be vulnerable and consider what to do if we are concerned. This may be something that you are familiar with, or it may be something that is brand new. Refreshing your knowledge is key with safeguarding. Keeping up to date with changes and new terminology is important. An awareness of this subject is also on the government's agenda, which we will explore a little later. Before we start, I'd like you to think about how confident you are with your knowledge and understanding of child abuse linked to faith or belief. 10 being extremely confident and 1 being not confident at all. Just note it down so that it gives us a bit of a measure when we repeat this at the end of today's session to show that you've travelled a journey with us today. We're going to start today's session thinking about what is it? So what is abuse linked to faith or belief? And it's where concerns for a child's welfare have been identified and could be caused by a belief in witchcraft, spirit or demonic possession, ritual or satanic abuse features, or when practices linked to faith or belief are harmful to a child. Any abuse that takes place against those who are branded or labelled either as a witch or as having been possessed by an evil spirit is unacceptable. Significant harm, including murder, can occur because of concerted efforts to excise or deliver evil from a child or vulnerable adult. The Children in Need Consensus 2016-17 identified 1,460 cases where the assessment of the child's needs showed child abuse linked to faith or belief as a possible factor. So when might it occur? The abuse may be as a result of a child being accused of being a witch. Abuse as a result of a child being accused of being possessed by evil spirits. Ritualistic abuse, which is prolonged sexual, physical, or psychological abuse. Satanic abuse, which is carried out in the name of Satan and may have links to cults. Any other harmful practice linked to belief or faith. In addition, fear of the supernatural is often used as a way to make children compliant at home. Children who behave badly are told they are possessed and will have to be punished. Children who are seen as being possessed may undergo a variety of treatments or rituals. If these do not work, the child may be abandoned or trafficked for domestic slavery or child sexual exploitation, or in extreme cases, killed. It can also be linked to other crimes and harmful practices, such as female genital mutilation, so-called honour-based violence, or forced marriage. It's important to remember that the beliefs which are the focus of this guidance are not confined to one faith or nationality or ethnic community, nor are they confined to new immigrant communities in this country. A child can be labelled or blamed as possessed by their family, the community or local leaders for a range of different reasons. Common justifications given include belief in evil spirits. A belief in evil spirits that can possess children is often accompanied by a belief that a possessed child can infect others with the condition. This could be through contact with shared food or simply being in the presence of the child. Scapegoating. A child could be singled out as the cause of misfortune within the home, such as financial difficulties, divorce, infidelity, illness, or death. Victoria Colombier was deemed a witch because her parents separated, and she was thought to be the cause. Bad behaviour, sometimes poor or challenging behaviour, is attributed to spiritual forces. Examples include a child who is seen as disobedient, rebellious, or overly independent, or a child who wets the bed, has nightmares, or falls ill. Physical differences. So a child could be singled out for having a physical difference or disability. Documented cases include children with learning disabilities, mental health issues, epilepsy, autism, stammers, and deafness. Left-handedness can also be considered a sign of the devil or demon within a child. Gifts and uncommon characteristics. If a child has a particular skill or talent, this can sometimes be rationalised as the result of possession or witchcraft. This can also be the case if the child is from a multiple or difficult pregnancy. Complex family structure and changes in family structure. Research suggests that a child living with an extended family, non-biological parent or foster parents is at greater risk. In these situations, they are most likely to have been subject to trafficking and made to work in servitude. Concerns about places of worship may emerge where there's a lack of priority given to the protection of children and a reluctance to get some leaders to get to grips with the challenges of implementing sound safeguarding policies and procedures. There may be assumptions that exist that the people in community would not abuse children, or that a display of repentance for an act of abuse is seen to mean that an adult no longer poses a risk of harm. There is a denial or minimisation of the rights of the child. There is a promotion of mistrust, or there are specific unacceptable practices that amount to abuse. Abuse linked to faith or belief can happen anywhere, but will most often start within the family home, following which a child may be taken to a practitioner or a witch doctor. As well as Victoria Colombier being a child safeguarding practice review in this area, there are other examples today that we will explore. And I would urge everybody to go to some of the links that we share at the end of today's session to have a look at some of the other case studies. Child B, name withheld for her protection, was brought to the UK by her aunt who passed her off as her daughter. The aunt, child B, and two other adults lived in the same flat. An 8-year-old boy who lived with them one day accused the child B of being possessed, and the adults agreed that this 10-year-old girl was a witch and that she was practicing an evil form of witchcraft. She was starved, cut with a knife, hit with a belt and shoes. She had chili peppers rubbed into her eyes and was repeatedly slapped, kicked, and bitten. At one stage, she was put in a laundry bag to be thrown in a river and was told, "This is the day that you are going to die." She was eventually discovered by a street warden on the steps to the block of her apartment in East London, covered in cuts, bruises, and with swollen eyes. The police found an entry in the notebook of her aunt which talks about child B being branded as a witch at a church event. Take a moment to reflect and think about what we could possibly learn from this case review that could support our practice. Although it may seem that children are identified as being possessed and therefore targets for faith-based abuse randomly, children are most likely to become victims if they are already vulnerable, unprotected, or can be identified as outsiders. And you can see some of the examples there on the screen. That's why it's important for us to make sure that we gain as much knowledge as we possibly can to equip ourselves to deal with any of these situations, to identify any of the signs and indicators. One of the ways in which we can do this is through monitoring attendance and making sure that we understand why children are not in school or not in the setting, by just reaching out and finding out where the children are on a day-to-day basis. we can at least try to keep them safe, along with lots of other things that we can put in place. So what are we actually looking out for? As you can see here, there's a long list of different signs and indicators that we should be looking out for, such as physical injuries, such as a child reporting that they have been accused of being evil and or that they are having the devil beaten out of them. Listen to the children, get involved in their play, listen to what they're telling you. The child or family may use the words on the screen, all of which refer to spiritual beliefs. A child becoming noticeably confused or withdrawn or disorientated alone or amongst other children. You may see personal care deteriorating, or you may see that the child doesn't have a close bond with their parent or carer. Attendance there, as we've talked about. And also, if a child is taken out of school altogether without another school place having been arranged, you may also see them wearing unusual jewellery and different items, or be in possession of strange ornaments or scripts. Be professionally curious, ask the questions, speak to them, engage in sustained shared thinking about some of the things that you see there on the screen. Depending on age, we will be, of course, observing these in different ways. There may be disclosures, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but it may be that you've just observed some of these things. And you will notice, if you've completed any other safeguarding training before today, that actually these link to a lot of the 4 types of abuse that we're a little bit more familiar with. Physical abuse. So within this, we might see beating and burning, cutting, stabbing, semi-strangulating, tying up the child, or rubbing chili peppers or other substances on the child's genitals or eyes. Emotional abuse can also occur. So they may not be allowed near or to share a room with family members and may be threatened with abandonment. The child may also be convinced that they are possessed. Listen to their words. Neglect. The child's family and community may have failed to ensure appropriate medical care, supervision, education, good hygiene, nourishment, clothing, or warmth. All signs and indicators of types of abuse that we have been conditioned to know about when we work in education and childcare. So it's really thinking of the broader meanings behind why this might be happening. Children who have been singled out in this way, in the sexual abuse way, can be particularly vulnerable to sexual abusers within the family, the community, or the faith organisation. These people exploit the belief as a form of control or threat. So the signs of abuse linked to faith or a belief are similar to the forms that we've talked about. However, children abused for the purpose of removal of demons or possessions often display particular and significant signs of abuse, either physically, in their presentation, or in their behaviours. So clothing. It's believed by some that a demon is represented by fire, and in order to extinguish the demon, the child must be cooled down as much as possible. So children can be found in minimal clothing for this reason. There may be scars due to lots of different physical abuse going on that's gone over a period of time, restraint markings, and sometimes they're being tied down or held and may have marks around their neck, wrists and ankles, or even some branding. Water or magical drinks. Drinks are one of the most commonly occurring ways parents choose to help their child. However, the contents of the drinks, often a small bottle of water, are not checked. As such, what parents are thinking is water can actually be anything. In some cases, this has included a saltwater mixture, cannabis, and other Class A drugs, infused with water to make the child appear compliant. In fact, the water is poisoning the child drinking it. And then we have there a prayer read out from the Quran, the The prayer itself does not refer to demons and witches, but the person reading this aloud in front of the child is said to then be able to tell if the child is possessed or not. A child may have explicit knowledge of or make referral to this prayer. The action plan set out by the government, the National Working Group on Child Abuse Linked to Faith or Belief, is to help raise awareness of the issues of child abuse and to encourage practical steps to be taken to prevent such abuse. It's been developed through partnership on the National Working Group between central government and local statutory partners, faith leaders, voluntary sector organisations and the police. Engaging communities is one of the ways in which the working group have talked about being an action. So this is part of the action plan. Africans Unite Against Child Abuse, work directly with families of African origin to support parents to keep their children safe and to help them to be successful. There are different organisations that do this type of work, looking at parents understanding child development and thinking about common difficulties that children might have, and really educating to get parents to understand that if there is something that doesn't feel quite right with your child, then this is the developmental process behind it. This is what's happening for that child, and this is how we can support you as a parent. There's lots of different ways by engaging communities that we can get everybody to understand that it's everybody's responsibility to safeguard children. There's training, there's community grants for awareness raising work, and everybody working together just gives that real sense of us trying to keep the children safe. We must be empowering practitioners, what we're doing right now, CPD, and making sure that we really understand this type of abuse. And then we also have a collection of signposting for them to go off and seek further advice if needed, and for you to do the same. We should be engaging with frontline practitioners in lots of different services and making sure that we know what's going on in our own community. We need to develop approaches to support and reintegrate victims, including psychological and therapeutic support, and find out what is going on in your area, what is your offer in that area. And you may find that by visiting the local safeguarding partnership or the children's board, whatever it is called in your local authority, they will have lots of useful resources to support. We need to improve an understanding among inspectors and thus impact of inspection on children at risk of or being harmed by abuse linked to faith or belief. If you are involved in supporting children who have been victims of child abuse linked to faith or belief, the difficulties that you may need to overcome are quite broad, but we would encourage provision of community support for witnesses and promote more joined up work between the criminal justice and safeguarding. A lot of that work is ongoing. And communicating these key messages. Some of you may be sitting there today thinking, I've never heard of this type of abuse before. And that is one step, the first step in awareness. So our knowledge gained from today, we can really put into practice just by having an awareness of what abuse linked to faith or belief is. The second case study here is about a 15-year-old boy who came to visit his sister and her boyfriend in London along with his siblings for Christmas in 2010. Unfortunately, this one doesn't end well. The previous one didn't end well either, but this one ends in a fatality. So a lot of this was due to finding a pair of wet pants which belonged to Christie. Wetting is an act popularly linked to witchcraft. So thinking back to our previous slides, how we looked at those signs and indicators, and one of them was wetting the bed, wetting self. And so He was then accused of trying to harm the child and then punched, kicked, and headbutted before beating him with a metal weightlifting bar as hard as he could and knocking out his teeth with a hammer. He also ripped apart one of his ears with a pair of pliers and broke 4 floor tiles on his head and forced Christie's siblings to join in the violence and help clear the blood. On Christmas Day, with his face beaten to a barely recognisable pulp, Christie was thrown into a bath and drowned because he was too weak to keep his head above the water. For us to make a change, we need to get uncomfortable. And these case studies are uncomfortable. They are heartbreaking. But we can be part of trying to support the victims, but also being a part of the prevention. So what can you do? You need to be calm, open, and non-confrontational. Report any concerns that you have to your designated safeguarding lead. Consider informing the local authority where needed, and the support and action that can be provided from your local authority and the company that you work for, the setting that you work for, the educational establishment. So we need to listen carefully to what the children are saying. That's not only through disclosures, but it's also in the day-to-day. Let them know that they've done the right thing by telling you if there is a disclosure. Tell them it's not their fault. Say you'll take them seriously. Don't confront the alleged abuser. Explain exactly what you're going to be doing next. And report what the child has told you as soon as possible. If your concern relates to a professional, for example, a faith leader, consideration should also be given to inform the local authority designated officer or the LADO. And again, check your local authority policies and procedures as well, because they can differ. It's important for us to digest this information today. It's hard hitting, it's really sad, and it can mean that you need to take a few breaks afterwards because it is such a sensitive subject. And when we work in education and childcare, we're often very empathic and take on some of these emotions. So I want you to think about, whilst you're taking that time out, what are your key takeaways today? And what will you do next? Hopefully the impact that this will have on you is that you've got a better understanding and a better awareness of this particular type of abuse. And then think about how it will benefit you and impact the learners in your care. There are lots of support and guidance and extra information really in all of these links that you see on your screen. Africa Safeguarding Children is an excellent charity who have lots of resources, and you'll see lots more case studies to support what you're teaching or what you're learning. The National Action Plan to Tackle Child Abuse Linked to Faith or Belief, which is what we have referred to today, is a key piece of information for you to have a look at and share with colleagues. The Victoria Colombier Foundation UK, again, lots of resources, lots of case studies and lots of further information for you. And then we also have some links there to the West Yorkshire Consortium and the 31-8, which again has lots and lots of resources that can make you fully understand what this child abuse is all about. So today's bite-sized session, thank you for joining us. It was a CPD session where we've looked at child abuse linked to faith or belief. And hopefully now you're reflecting on your current practice to identify children and young people who may be vulnerable and have a better understanding of what might be right in front of you. We have some upcoming bite-sized webinars. We have wider forms of child abuse, which covers things like FGM, and CSE, so you can tune into some of those. We have a session on domestic abuse and a session on county lines. And for more information and registration details, you can visit the qualifications page for delivery support on VCerts. And returning to the question that I asked at the start was, how confident are you with your knowledge and understanding of child abuse linked to faith or belief? So please note down, just for your own record really, where you are now. So you may have started at 5, you may be at 8 now, you may have known nothing at the start, but you may have travelled a journey with us today, and I really do hope that you have. Any questions that you may have, please direct to our email addresses that were given at the start. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye bye.